guys, how you going? Sit down, BKRsport. We're back here for another season review of 2024. Unfortunately, this still is kind of the depressing point of the season reviews because obviously we are going from the bottom to the top, but obviously it will improve every single video. That's the positive to take out of it. Yeah, we like that. We like that. But obviously, guys, we've already done the West Tigers and the South Sydney Rabbitohs, so if you have missed out on those videos after you watch this one here, you can go back and have a look at my season reviews for those. I don't hold back. I tell you my genuine thoughts, whether positive or negative, give you some hope going into 2025, but also tell you a little bit concerned. You know, there's some concerns, some positives. You have to look at it all, man. And, you know, I will put out here first up that I know that I support a team that is down here actually to the next video after this one. So don't worry. You know, I will talk to you honestly about the team that I support as well. Don't worry about that. You know, we will go through every single team out of all 17 teams, and the one that's the next one is probably going to be the longest one. But guys, today we're here for the Parramatta of the Squeal, the Parramatta Eels. Parramatta Eels, who unfortunately did finish in 15th this season. Yes, they did finish in the bottom four. Obviously made the grand final in 2022. 2023 wasn't exactly a great year for them either. Finished around the middle of the pack. And then obviously this year have dropped off so significantly that it literally came down to the very last round of the season to see if they would get the wooden spoon or not. They went and won that game. We'll just quickly show you, even though you already know it. They won that game 60-26 over the West Tigers. However, whoever lost that game was going to finish in 17th. So very, very disappointing there for the Eels across the entirety of the season, especially considering that I think it's 38 or 39 years now since Parramatta have won a premiership. And also to be honing in on that, that was when there was only New South Wales teams in the competition. You didn't have the Broncos or the Titans or any establishment from the Gold Coast. North Queensland Cowboys weren't there. Dolphins, Warriors, Melbourne. I think Canberra just came in late on in their tenure. But I don't know if they won a premiership then. If they did, then you can kind of argue it, but we do usually try to include Canberra as relative. Well, it was New South Wales Rugby League, right? It was New South Wales Rugby League, but obviously technically they're ACT. Anyway, we're not going to get into semantics, and we're not going to get straight into that kind of stuff. I'm just saying it has been a long tenure, a long, long time for Parramatta fans to really wait and hope. And obviously 2009, they did make the grand final against the Melbourne Storm, which is unfortunate that they weren't able to win that game because obviously the Melbourne Storm were cheating at the time. They cheated the salary cap, which meant that no one won in 2009, which is really, really sad because Eels fans, they probably believe that they deserve that grand final. I'm on the side of, well, the Storm had to beat this team and beat this team and beat this team and knock these guys out. So if they knock them out, it's just as unfair as knocking the Eels out in the grand final because, you know what I'm saying, right? So although I do think the Eels were the best off that year, based off of what we've seen, and based on the fact they're in the grand final against a cheating team, you can't just give them the premiership based on the fact that other teams were unfortunately done over by the Melbourne Storm in that time. And then obviously in 2022, they made the grand final against the Penrith Panthers, where they got whooped in the grand final, but it was great for them to get back up there because the 2010s were a really rough time to be a Parramatta Eels fan. A really, really rough time where they, actually cheated the salary cap themselves to win 2 wooden spoons, which is really unfortunate for them, really disappointing, to cheat the salary cap and to, not win a premiership, but actually win the opposite. So I feel for Eels fans. I do. I feel for Eels fans because they are a passionate bunch out there. And although, they didn't have necessarily the greatest crowds when they weren't great, and now this year when they weren't great, I do know that they are just waiting to get that passionate side out of them. And they're just waiting to get loud and to get proud. And this year, unfortunately, was not the year for them to do that. So, like I said, it literally came down to the back end of the year and literally came down to the last game of the season for them to not come last. I don't want Eels fans to think that just because they didn't get the wooden spoon that it is now a positive. And like going into 2025, this is awesome. It's like, well, you beat the Tigers and you whooped them and you did what you needed to do, which is great. And that is a positive. It's the negative that I brought up with the Tigers, that they lost that game, which does bring your thought process back in regards to the positives that could be coming next season. On the other side of things with the Eels, you don't have those positives being drawn back. You have them kind of return where you think, okay, well, they did put points on here. They did actually score a few points throughout the season. And they did have reasons to have their season very up and down. With like Mitchell Mose being out, they had a lot of players being injured, like every other team does. But there was a lot of chops and changes. Dylan Brown being out, their hookers a little bit how you go on, their forwards in and out, or just not as good as they once were. The back line leaking points in defensively. Like, they give up a lot of points this season. A lot of points, as you can see here, that we'll get into in a second. But they could score points. They just couldn't stop them. And that's another point, actually. That's another point in regards to this game. That 60-26, they still gave up 26 points. They still gave up 26 points, and we will get into this one. Don't you worry, baby. Don't you worry. But that's a perfect example. Round 26 is the perfect example of the Parramatta Eels season in 2024. Could score a lot of points, but concede a lot. So you look at this ladder positioning, they obviously equaled the Rabbitohs on 20 points. Had they lost that game, like I said, they would have finished last. Winning that game, their points differential was... They just needed to win by, I think, 6 points. I think it was 6 points or something at the time to get above the Rabbitohs. If they had won by like 4 or whatnot, I think the Rabbitohs would have still finished high, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong there, though. But they did finish in third last. Now, this is 2 points below the Titans. Their points differential was minus 155, whilst the Titans were minus 168. So their points differential was actually better in the end, obviously helped by that last game. But the point of the matter is that they weren't too far off finishing there. Still 5 points away from finishing out of the bottom 4, where the Warriors were on minus 62 as well. But you don't worry about that because they had that draw. And the Eels, with their points differential, were minus 188 and minus 287 for the Rabbitohs and Tigers. So they were definitely better than the Tigers. Rabbitohs is a bit of a muchness. But the issue, as you look here, is 494 points they scored. No, sorry, that's the Rabbitohs. 561 points they scored this year. But a whopping 716 points were conceded by the Parramatta Eels in 2024. They won 7 games, they lost 17. And it does feel like, from the outset, I haven't gone back and had a look at the draw yet, but it does feel like on the outset that they were getting whooped in a lot more games and were close. Maybe not at the beginning part of the season, but I think they fell apart midway through the year, especially when Moses obviously went down injured through Origin, and then definitely never came back from that. But yeah, and Mitchell Moses was injured before Origin too, so they've had their key playmaker, who is their guy, go down, and they've had to chuck Dylan Brown to the 7. They've had to put Dejan Arce in, and they've trialled Blaze Talangi, I think, in the 6 as well. They have trialled their halves a lot, and when you look at teams that have to mix up their halves combinations quite a bit, that's where the issues usually lay. But that comes down to the attack, usually, not the defense. So the worrying thing about Parramatta is that as a collective, as a team, it shouldn't really matter too much who is in the spots. Whether 1 through to 13, it shouldn't actually matter in regards to the defense, because it's about the defensive schemes and the systems that every single player is being taught in the exact same way. But the attack didn't really falter too much. You look here, they scored 100 more points than the Tigers. They scored about 70 odd more points than the Rabbitohs. They scored about 80 odd more, or 70 odd, 80, 70 odd more points than the Titans. 40 more points than the Warriors. They scored 25, 30 odd more than the Broncos. About 50 odd more than the Dragons. Only 15 less than the Dolphins, to be fair. 100 or 90 also more than the Raiders. They scored 90 more than what the Knights did. And they actually even scored more than the Bulldogs, who were up there in 6th position on 529, by about 30 odd points. So 15th through to 6th, they weren't too far off in regards to the attacking marker. Obviously, still behind like the Storm and the Roosters and the Sharks and the Cowboys and whatnot. But even the Panthers at 580 shows that the Eels can attack, because 561 is in 15th, but 580 is in 2nd, and have won the last 3 premierships in a row. So, there is a positive reading to take out of that for Parramatta. And the reading is, you can attack with the best even when you do have players out. However, your defense is where you really get let down, and are second worst in the comp, and also only about 30 better than the West Tigers. So, a couple of positives and negatives to take out of that. But yeah, really, really frustrating in regards to this section here in 7-16 given up, because that should be a team collective, regardless of who's playing. Now, we go back to the beginning part of the year, and it actually started off quite well. I'm not going to lie to you. This is actually some quite good footy here. So they beat the Bulldogs 26-8. At the time, we were like, okay, yeah, whatever, it's the Dogs. Now we look back and go, wow, they put 26 points past a really defensively gritty team that you look up here, and the Bulldogs conceded just the 433 points. So 400 points they conceded outside of this game, effectively, right? So that's actually a really impressive win for them. Gave it a red-hot crack against the Panthers there in round 2. Then went and beat Manly, who are a top 8 team. Did lose by 1 point here to the Tigers, however, right? And I think this is where their season started to fall down. So early in the year, this is where their season started to fall down, because that should never be happening, especially considering the Tigers came last and that was their third wooden spoon in a row. That should not be happening. So these 3 games here, the Bulldogs, the Panthers, and Manly, is a real tough start to the year in hindsight, right? Because again, didn't know about the Bulldogs until later on that year. But that is a really tough start, and they won 2 of them and only just lost this Panthers game where, you know, it was close enough. Very happy with that to start with. But yeah, losing to the Tigers like that, heartbreaking and really crucial. But with that being said, they then go and get whooped by the Raiders, who didn't really have a great attack this year. And I mean whooped. 41 points to Raiders. You look at the Raiders attack, 474 points. That is 90 odd, less than what the Eels scored. And were just above the Knights in regards to that. To be fair, that's even worse. But they were off the mark, and the Raiders were nearly a bottom 4, bottom 5 team in regards to their attack. So conceding 41 points there is not great. Obviously beat the Cowboys. Cowboys weren't that great to start this year, and then got whooped by the Dolphins. Got beaten by Manly. Got beaten by the Broncos. Got whooped by the Storm. Got beaten by and whooped by the Rabbitohs, who we've already done their season review. So that little point here, this 3, 4, 5 game stretch, and you could argue the 6 out of 7, take away this one, and then add in that Raiders game into this stretch, is just deplorable in regards to giving up points. 41 points, 44 points, 32 points, 30 points, 48 points, and 42 points. So that's a lot of points to give up. It really is. But yet you can see 26 points there for against the Rabbitohs. 16's not great, 14's not great, 18, 16. Actually, to be fair, their attack in this area wasn't that great either. It wasn't that great besides this Cowboys game, and we know the Cowboys defense was really all over the shop this year. So that's a really, really poor area of the season just after they started off so crash hot, red hot in this opening 3 games there. And then you go down to the Sharks. That's an impressive one. This is a heartbreaking one because I believe it was the last seconds the Bulldogs did win this game there. I think it was a Labor Day holiday or King's holiday. I can't remember. But yeah, they just lost that game. This was at a weird time for the Sharkies in this time. But with that being said, good win, 34 points. Gave it a crack against the Roosters, still lost. Lost to the Knights, lost to the Rabbitohs, and then lost to the Titans, who were actually in a pretty good period of their year at that time. Obviously, I'm a Titans fan. So this one is just a part of it all, realistically. I know it might suck for Eels fans to say, but with that being said, at the time, it was very much expected. This one wasn't necessarily expected. Both those teams were pretty poor at that time. Actually, no, that was the time the Rabbitohs were coming off the back of their own losing streak. And then the Eagles played the Rabbitohs back into form, and then the Titans really doubled down on that when they played the Rabbitohs the week after, and the Rabbitohs flogged them too. So the Eels, unfortunately, played them back into form throughout this real tough period for them. Went and got flogged by the Storm. This was a really good win for them over there in Mount Smart in Auckland, Go Media Stadium. That was a really, really positive win for them, which actually, I would say, avoided the spoon for them. I think that's what really kicked on for the back part of the year to keep themselves in it, because I don't think that this game happens unless they have something to play for because of this game in the Warriors. I don't know if that's shown on the screen. This game here, the Dragons and the Eels game 44-40. So I don't think that happens without them beating New Zealand, which gave them a little bit of, spruce to their step. They started to really pump along. This is the biggest choke of all time, nearly. Like, this was crazy. 34-36 with the Panthers. Look at them. They're leading by like 14 points or whatnot, and they can see 3 tries in the last 7 minutes of the game. So that was just dreadful there, that they were able to throw that one away. Then got pumped by the Roosters. This was unacceptable of a loss. They choked away a massive lead. I think they were up like 24-4 or something like that, or nearly even 24-0 against the Broncos, and the Broncos came back and won that one. And we all know how poor the Broncos were this year. And then, this Dragons game here and this Tigers game, this is a great way to finish off the season so they could avoid that spoon, but it also hides a little bit of what the Eels did in 2024. It also hides the fact that the Eels were as poor as they were, but you have that real energy from scoring 104 points in your last 2 games, and you can even go and say 128 points in your last 3 games. So it does hide a lot of the issues for the Eels. But at least if you look at the defensive side of things as well, 30 points to the Broncos, 40 points to the Dragons, and 26 points to the Tigers, despite scoring 60. Right, but this game here, they were up by an insane margin in this game. It was like 44-6 or something like that. It is. They score, where is it? That's the wrong side. They scored all their points before the 61-minute mark. And then there were 5 tries in the last 11 minutes of the game for the Dragons here. Like, they clocked off. Like, they gave up, and there was a slight little chance of the Dragons to steal that game. There is no way that this should have been a close game when the Eels absolutely blew them out in the first 61 minutes of this game. There's no way, right? And they did miss a couple of kicks. They missed 5 conversions. The Dragons missed just the 1 there. But yeah, that really does leave a sour taste in your mouth, that Dragons game. So what I would say based off this season, they actually started off really well. Really started to struggle once they kind of lost their momentum through that Tigers game. Really struggled. And then towards the back part of the year, they started just picking up a couple of wins here and there to salvage their year. Obviously, Mitchell Moses down. Good on them for being able to finish off with a couple of wins. This one, again, big. And in the last 2 games of the season, they should have had the win here. But overall, a real flat year. A real flat year outside of this. And if you're a rugby league aficionado and you're passionate about rugby league, you know defense wins championships. And you can't be winning a game 44-40, especially when you're up like 44-18 or 16 or whatnot with 11 minutes to go. So that is what I would say about the snapshot of the Eels season. Now we go here to their signings and whatnot and their contracts. So Simonson is signed up for years. You don't have to worry about that. Blaze Talungi, we'll get into a second in their losses and gains. He's off to the Panthers. But what I do notice here from my first little glance is that all of their contracts are pretty much finishing next year. So Brad Arthur has been sacked this year, and they've brought in Jason Riles, obviously Trent Barrett. My thoughts on Trent Barrett, people who know this channel know my thoughts that are not exactly too crash hot on Trent Barrett. So it's not surprising how they kind of did the year, and also he's a very good attacking coach, but just not good defensively, right? And we know that through Bulldogs, we know it through Manly. I think he was the offensive coordinator, the attacking coach for the Panthers a couple of years ago. So Trent Barrett really was a big problem about this team this year, but they've brought in Jason Riles, which is giving them fresh hope for next year. But this is a positive and a negative here. Brendan Hands, Bryce Cartwright, Gutho, Detonasi's off. Dylan Brown until 2025 with a player option until 2031. So he has signed a big contract, but he gets to decide if he lives it out, which I really heavily doubt right now. I really do. I think the Warriors could potentially come calling. I don't know. Mutual option here for Hayes Dunster. Jermaine Hopgood next year. Joey Lussick, Opahengawi next year. Junior Paulo, 2026, so you got an extra year on that. Kamatualangi next year. Micah Sivo, next year, and then also a mutual option, which would be interesting to see what happens there, because he's very up and down, but he still scores a lot of tries. Marquez Makatoa at the end of this year. Matt Dury, Mitchell Moses. This is the big one here, right? So they've got until 2026, but it's also player options after that. So he's on a very similar wavelength right now to Dylan Brown, which is both of your big-time halves pairings. And he can't leave until 2026, but he can start talking at the end of next year. And again, it's his player option. It's not club option like Micah Sivo has here, but it's player option for Mitchell Moses. So that's a really worrying sign here for both Dylan Brown and also Mitchell Moses, that it's not actually in the club's hands. It's not actually in the club's hands. It's in Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown's hands. Harper, nothing. I think Ogden, nothing. Madison has got player options. There's a lot of player options here, mind you, for this team. Ryan Madison, end of next year. Sean Russell, end of next year. Sean Lane, end of next year with a mutual option. Panasini, end of next year with a player option. Whitney McGregor and Zach Sinney. So the key takeaway here from the contract situation for Parramatta Eels, most of their players are at the end of the next year. That means Jason Riles can really start to design his own team and look for other players that he believes will benefit his style, his system, and what he wants to do with the Eels, which is a positive. But the negative is that if he wants to remain with these guys, a lot of these guys, most of them actually have, most of the key players do have the player options. Which I'm not saying that other clubs don't do. I'm just saying that this is it's a worrying sign with both of Dylan Brown and Moses being off contract at very similar times. And yeah, a lot of their big players could be like, oh, well, you know, this team's calling, I'm going to go there. So, concerning there for the Eels. Development list, Charlie Geimer, I liked him when I saw him in 2024. Ethan Sanders, I think he went to the Raiders, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just quickly have a look here. Yeah, he went to the Raiders, I was right. So, that development list is incorrect there. Oh, it's just showing this year. Josh Brazel, not too sure about. Luca Moretti has played a couple of years, well, has played a little bit with the Eels now. Has played international footy for Italy, I believe, but a bit shaky. I think this one's the best one there. I think Ethan Sanders is great, but Charlie Geimer is the one that I really enjoyed this year. And Sam Tuivaiti, who has got 2 years on the development list, I don't know too much about. So it's not too bad. It's definitely not too bad in regards to the development list there. You're not complaining. But Charlie Geimer, Luke Moretti, great. Don't know Brazel and don't know Tuivaiti, but Ethan Sanders is not there anymore. So going into this year, in 2024, they received Kelvin Tuilagi from the Manly Seagulls and Morgan Harper from the Manly Seagulls. I'm not a fan of that player addition. I'm not a fan of them going out and getting these two guys. I think Tuilagi is the better of these two. I did think that Morgan Harper, his career kind of was swept away once he did struggle against the Statistical in that game, and then he didn't have that confidence again. I don't think he was as bad as people make him out to be, but I personally don't know about that signing, but it's like a bit of depth. It's like a bit of whatever. And Kelvin Tuilagi played a little bit this year, has a great tackle on him, can miss a lot of tackles, however. I'm just not a massive fan of the games there. So that's why I'm really looking for Jason Riles to really implement his own system and his own style, because that's based on no defense realistically, which is the issue with the Eels. Those two signings for mine are based very similarly on no defense, but some good attack. 2024 losses. They lost Jack Murchie to the Giants, Hodgson, who retired, Andrew Davey retired, Wonga Blake to St. Helens, Gerard Momoisiat released, Samuel Loizu to the Tigers on a trainer trial. There's not much you're missing here. There's really not much you're missing here. This is probably the right decision here in regards to most of these guys. Jack Murchie didn't get much going. Josh Hodgson obviously had to retire. You did miss out on him, but also you've got plenty of hookers that kind of do a similar job to Hodgson. He's not the same. He wasn't the same Hodgson that he was at the Raiders, obviously. Andrew Davey, S fine. Wonga Blake wasn't happening. At points in his career was right, but wasn't happening. This is not much of a loss, and this is also not much of a loss. So I would say this, for the most part, is correct, in my opinion. I think that they made some right decisions here, some correct decisions, and went down the correct path. This one I question in regards to only attackers, no defenders. I do think you need to really hone in on that. But let's have a look at 2025 games. All right, so they got, obviously, Taxman Zach Lomax from the Dragons, and Isaiah Yongi. Is it Longi or Yongi? I'm not too sure. From the Panthers. He has a lot of heavy raps about him. But with that being said, I will bring this up here. In their losses, they lost Ethan Sanders to the Raiders, Blaze Salungi to the Panthers, and Regan Campbell-Gillard has been released. This and this is very similar. Like, they're giving up one massive great option here that I know Eels fans are coping and saying he's not that good. I think that he has a lot of room to improve, but I think he can improve. And it's like, I don't know a great deal about Isaiah. He does have high raps. No, maybe not as high as Blaze, based on the fact that Blaze has actually played some, big-time rugby league. But I just question the overall point of this, to be fair, unless this is just kind of biting back at the fact that they got that release. So, I don't know, just from my outside perspective, I think it's a bit of a muchness there. Two high prospects. At least this one's played a bit of rugby league. This one hasn't really played the NRL just yet. But, I don't know. We wait and see. We wait and see in regards to that. I just think it's a bit of a muchness not right now. But this is huge. This is huge. Lomax does miss some tackles, but his attack is great. It gives you a brilliant kicker, even though you've got Mitchell Moses already. Lomax is a great attacking threat on the wing, right? But I think he wants to play centres, which the Eels do need, to be completely fair. Like, they do need it. Because you go and have a look at, the centres that they were... they've actually needed centres for a few years now, to be completely honest with you. But they've got Will Penasini, and they had Blaze Salungi, so he's just coming straight in for Blaze Salungi, I would assume. Unless they're putting one to the wing for a Sean Russell, because I guarantee you they'll keep Mike Rasivo there next year. So that is a great signing. I think that is huge. I think Lomax probably does regret it considering the season, but I don't think he should, and I'll get into that in a second, because I think the Eels actually have more upside to them than the Dragons do going forward. And I know it's a crazy thing to say considering the ladder positioning, but I think there is more upside in the Eels than there is the Dragons personally. So I'm okay with both of these. This one, wait and see. This one is a great signing. This one, I would have kept to protect if you lose Mitchell Moses / Dylan Brown. I would have protected the loss there. So I probably would have kept Sanders, but he probably thinks he's ready. But he's also gone to a Raiders team that also has halves. So it's kind of a similar situation there with the Raiders. But there's more quality at the Eels, I guess. But those guys have player options that they could leave if it doesn't go to plan next year. This one we've already explained in depth with Isaiah Longi. And then Regan Campbell-Gillard. Interested. I think a lot of teams probably would like to go for him. Hasn't necessarily lived up to his big bopper reputation. Did have a great year in 2022 and is a great front row forward. I'm interested to see why realistically this has happened. There might be something that I don't know about. But losing him will lose a lot in the middle. So I think other teams will be licking their lips at this, to be completely honest with you. So I disagree with this one, but there probably is a reasoning as to why that's happened comparatively. But I do know there's a lot of rumors about where he's going, this and that. So overall, I do agree with the majority of these. I do see quite a few positives with both of those, but there is still question marks around a couple of them. So overall, in regards to the Parramatta Eels season in 2024, it's very obvious that it was a fail. It's not rocket science. I think I had them as an 8th or 7th ranked team this year. I think I put them up there into the top 8 or might have just been missing. I can't remember. You guys would know my season predictions. I expected a lot more out of the Eels this year. I think Parramatta fans also expected a lot more out of Parramatta Eels this season. But it wasn't to be. Coaching changes, lack of discipline. They have focused for so long on being an offloading team where it's very high risk, high reward. The Eels are a really confusing team going forward. But I'll give you the positive. And the positive, and this is what I was saying in regards to Zach Lomax making that trade from the Dragons to the Eels, is that the Eels do welcome back their halves pairing next year in Moses and Dylan Brown. I don't know what they do with Gutherson. I don't know. There is talk that he's not going to be fullback next year. When Gutherson, Brown, and Moses are on the field together, it is usually very good, right? Then number 9, they got Brendan Hands and Joey Lussick. Is it Joey or Freddie Lussick? Can't remember. It's one of the Lussicks, though. It is one of the Lussicks. I always get confused with this. Where is he? It is Joey Lussick. I was right. See, I'm good. Yeah, there is positives in the sense that when they get their spine back, I'm a little bit concerned about the hooker rotation. I think Hands is fine, but I don't think it's going to win you that combination of Lussick and Hands. But I do think the 1, 6, and 7 are great. And I think that this next year, in 2025, we'll do a much more in-depth preview when it comes to the year next year. But I think that there is a lot of positives that they can do it and get back into the top 8 and be a top 6 team again next year. But there is 3 reliance here. 1, Jason Riles works out. And Jason Riles is able to implement his system into the team that they've currently already got. Because you're not going to be able to go out. Every fan thinks, oh, I'm going to sign this guy and this guy and that guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, that guy. It doesn't work like that, right? And you have to, Jason Riles has to prove himself to opposition players and to opposition organisations and managers and everything like that to show that this is a club you want to be at. To show that being here is going to get you somewhere. So Jason Riles still has a lot to prove in regards to that department because he hasn't been the head coach of a big-time NRL team before. Obviously, does have experience, but also a lot of other coaches have had experience in similar roles. Doesn't necessarily work out. But Jason Riles is a big year for him to prove that he is the guy to lead the Parramatta Eels going forward. Another one is that, obviously, they need it to be successful next year. It is a desperate situation for the Eels. They are in desperation mode. Because if they finish in the bottom 4 again, you have got Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown with player options that are going to be seeked heavily, man. You know, maybe the Roosters go for... Maybe Sam Walker does go back to Queensland. You don't know. Maybe the Roosters save Mitchell Moses. What if Dylan Brown wants to go back to New Zealand? Play with the Warriors? You know, Andrew Webster gets the Warriors back on track next year in 2025. You don't know. So the point is that both those guys have player options that are looming. They're not now. They're looming. So the Eels need to be desperate to succeed in 2025 so that they don't have to worry about convincing. Because once you have to convince, you're already on the back foot because the team's not doing well. And maybe, and this is a controversial take, maybe you keep Moses and you try everything you can to keep Moses. And maybe Dylan Brown does go back to the Warriors. And maybe it's time to trial something new out. Maybe Jason Riles does trial something out. I know Dylan Brown, the quality he possesses, but I also do think that he became a bit lethargic in these last couple of years, comparatively to when he was there in 2022 and made the grand final. Right? I do think that things change quickly. And although it might be a crazy thought, that's a lot of money that you get back in the cap. Maybe he does go to the Warriors or he does go somewhere else. And you can really start to retinker and reshape this roster that has been underwhelming these last 2 years coming off that grand final loss. Maybe there are things that can be done that are on a big level that set you up for the future, because the Eels aren't going to win the comp next year. That's not what I'm saying. I think there are positives. They're not going to win the comp next year, but they can get back on the right track provided a few things really do go in their favour. Jason Riles and also the team coming together defensively, collectively. Defensive efficiency is important. That's what wins premierships. And even if you don't win the premiership, the defense is going to get you from 15th place to anywhere from 6 to 10. And that is a better year. That is a more successful year. And you can work on those convincings with Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses to keep them long term. So that's my thoughts here on the Parramatta Eels. I do think there are positives. There are a lot of negatives. But there's a reason why they're in third last. And all these teams down here in the bottom 9, even 8th, will kind of couple a little bit. There is just so many ups and downs there. There's only, probably 3 teams that you can really not find too many negatives for, right? I've even got negatives to talk about with the Melbourne Storm. So, don't take it offensively. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you believe about the Parramatta Eels. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with parts? Do you disagree with parts? I want to hear what you have to say. Jump into the comment section, comment it, and let's see what you have to say. Because this is just my personal opinion from an outsider's perspective. And don't worry, I'll do this for my team as well, where you guys can see what I have to say about the Gold Coast Titans. But, I am trying to give you a fair analysis on an outsider's perspective. Obviously, I do watch every single game on the channel, the stream. And we talk about with you guys. I deal with fans of all different teams. So don't take it offensively. Just know that I am doing my best to read into it from a perspective that maybe not be yours, but you can take parts of mine, take parts of what you see, and then also formulate it in your own brain. But alright guys, I appreciate you. Obviously hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you're new around here. All 17 teams will be done, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya.